the Kennedy Compound, Aesthetic and History. You're watching Cultured Elegance. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. The Kennedy Compound in Hyannisport was more than just a summer retreat. It was the heart of a family that shaped American history. Hyannisport was where Jack first dreamed of becoming president, a place where the Kennedy family spent their summers playing touch football on the backyard lawn, forging lifelong friendships with neighborhood kids. Their days were filled with golfing, sailing, and setting lobster traps, all part of their weekly routine. Home to Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. and Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy, it was where they raised their 9 children: Joseph Jr., John, Rosemary, Kathleen, Eunice, Patricia, Robert, Jean, and Edward. From JFK's presidency to Bobby's fight for justice and Ted's long Senate career, this seaside estate witnessed their greatest triumphs and deepest tragedies, becoming synonymous with ambition, legacy, and the enduring bonds of the Kennedy family. In 1926, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. rented a summer cottage at 50 Marchant Avenue in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. 2 years later, he purchased the home, which had originally been built in 1904. Recognizing the need for more space as his family expanded, he renovated and enlarged the structure to accommodate his wife Rose and their 9 children. The Kennedy children spent their summers and early autumns in and around this house, developing a deep passion for sailing and various competitive sports, interests that would remain with them throughout their lives. Before settling in Hyannisport, the Kennedys spent their summers at a cottage on Nantasket Beach in Hull, Massachusetts, where their eldest son, Joseph Jr., was born in 1915. In the mid-1920s, Joe Sr. considered purchasing a home in Cohasset, Massachusetts. However, his attempt to join the prestigious Cohasset Country Club was met with rejection, reportedly due to anti-Irish Catholic discrimination. According to historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, the ruling Protestant elite of the time, often referred to as WASPs, still looked down upon Irish Catholics in Cohasset. Undeterred, Joe Sr. turned his attention to Hyannisport, where he had connections at the Hyannisport Golf Club. Despite its reputation as another bastion of the New England Yankee establishment, he was accepted as a member, which played a key role in his decision to purchase property in the seaside village. By 1941, the Hyannisport house had become the Kennedys' primary legal residence. Over time, the family's presence in the area grew. In 1956, John F. Kennedy purchased a smaller home at 111 Irving Avenue, close to his father's estate. 3 years later, in 1959, Edward Ted Kennedy acquired a neighboring house at 28 Marchant Avenue. However, in 1961, he sold the property to his brother Robert and Robert's wife, Ethel. Ted Kennedy would eventually return to the main house, living there until his death in 2009. The Hyannisport compound became not just a summer retreat, but a significant location for family gatherings, political discussions, and key moments in American history. According to the book, American Values, Lessons I Learned from My Family, Hyannisport was a magical paradise for me. I loved the endless palette of colors, the vivid blue of sea and sky, separated by rich green landscapes, peppered with ubiquitous roses, hydrangeas, and daffodils, each in their season, the gleaming white houses, and offshore, a panoply of brightly hued spinnakers running downwind. The ocean was always changing, from blue to every shade of green, to gray and almost black, to match the moods of the wind and sky. Here, surrounded by my family, I could indulge my obsession with the natural world. During the years when the Kennedy family compound served as the summer White House, a faint noise each Friday afternoon summoned everyone to assemble for the landing of my father's and Uncle Jack's green and white Marine Corps helicopters on the big lawn between Grandpa's house and the ocean. Grandpa's gardener, Wilbur, hoisted the presidential flag up the pole, and we cheered and waved as my dad and my uncles, Teddy, Steve Smith, and Sarge Shriver, climbed off the choppers. Leaving his own helicopter at last, Uncle Jack would go kiss Grandpa and Grandma on the front porch of the big house. Then all the cousins would pile onto the golf cart as Jack took the wheel for a spin. A waiting fleet of limousines would whisk away Jack's special assistants, Kenny O'Donnell and Dave Powers, the Irish Mafia Poles who hitched rides on Marine One for weekend visits with their own families. Police boats and a Coast Guard cutter bobbed just offshore, and fire engines stood poised among the flood of 100 reporters at the end of the driveway, adding to the excitement. In the summer of 1953, the newly engaged Jacqueline Bouvier and Jack Kennedy traveled to Hyannisport for the weekend to celebrate their engagement with a party at the Hyannisport Club. Unlike the rough-and-tumble Kennedys, Jackie, the daughter of a wealthy stockbroker, was more accustomed to refined social settings, yet she was a good sport as she adapted to the dynamic energy of her new family. At the end of that week, the Kennedys and their friends piled into one of the family's sailboats and set off on a weekend trip up the coast of Maine. It was a final adventure before the wedding, a grand celebration that became a media sensation, further solidifying the Kennedys' rising status in American politics. Though summers in Hyannisport were cherished, the family also gathered there for Thanksgiving. Many of the summer homes weren't winterized, so families layered up and gathered around their dining tables for one last meal before closing their houses until Memorial Day. For the Kennedys, Thanksgiving in 1956 began as it always had. The morning started with a big breakfast of bacon, eggs, and waffles. Rose, ever devout, attended early Mass at sunrise, while the rest of the family took their time before eventually making their way to the mid-morning service. After church, they went out for a sail despite the frigid November waters, where a splash felt like a slap. Once back on shore and cleaned up, they threw on old sweaters, skirts, and heavy walking shoes before gathering at the main house for dinner, which promptly began at 1 o'clock. There were no formal seating arrangements, except for Rose and Joe, who sat at opposite ends of the long mahogany dining table. That year, Jack quietly pulled his father aside into the sunroom. When they returned, their arms were draped around each other, both grinning. Jack had made his decision. He would run for president in 1960. Though the family would keep the news private for a while, the path to the White House was charted that night at the end of a quiet, dead-end street. On Election Day in 1960, it was there, at Hyannisport, that the Kennedys learned John F. Kennedy had been elected President of the United States. In fact, Jack himself went to bed before the final results were confirmed. The next morning, Caroline's nanny, Miss Shaw, entered his room and gently told his daughter, "Go wake your father and tell him, 'Good morning, Mr. President.'" Still half asleep, Jack smiled and looked over at Miss Shaw standing in the doorway. "Well now, is that right? Am I in?" he asked. "Of course you are, Mr. President," she assured him. With that, a new chapter in American history had begun. While Hyannisport was a place of joyous gatherings, triumphs, and the epitome of Kennedy family unity, it was also marked by profound tragedies that shaped the course of the family's legacy. The house became a backdrop for both extraordinary moments and devastating loss. In 1963, the family's idyllic world was shattered with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Jack's death, just 3 years after his presidency began, not only left a nation in mourning, but also marked the first of many personal tragedies that would reverberate through the family for decades. At Hyannis Port, Jack had often spoken of his dreams for the future, yet the house would become a symbol of the unfulfilled promises of his presidency. The family's grief was palpable, with each member coping in their own way, but the loss of Jack left a scar on the house, where so many memories of him lingered. Then, in 1968, came the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, Jack's younger brother, and a rising political star in his own right. Robert's tragic death while campaigning for president left the Kennedy family once again grappling with the loss of one of their brightest hopes. The Hyannis Port House, which had once served as a retreat for political strategizing and family bonding, now became a place of mourning and reflection. The family often sought solace in the home, yet its walls held echoes of grief that no amount of time or memory could erase. In the years that followed, the Kennedys continued to gather at Hyannis Port, but the house, once full of laughter and youthful ambition, became a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the unexpected losses that had forever altered the course of the family's destiny. The deaths of other family members, including the tragic plane crash that claimed the life of John F. Kennedy Jr. in 1999, further deepened the wounds, making Hyannis Port not only a place of celebration, but also a site of painful remembrance. Despite the tragedies, the house remained a place of resilience for the Kennedy family. The family continued to find strength in their shared history, and while the home was marked by sorrow, it was also a place where they could come together, reflect on the past, and look forward to the future. The legacy of the Kennedys, both the triumphs and the tragedies, was inextricably linked to the walls of that house, which had borne witness to some of the most significant moments in American history. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share, and check out our weekly newsletter, located in the description of this video. I'll see you in the next one.